Okay, thank you. And I didn't come up with the name, honestly. My original title was Stabilized Construction Entrances, but I guess that was a little lacking. I have to admit, this brings it out a little bit more for you guys here for a rather boring subject. So let's go through this. I have a quick question. How many people are attending this one that are designers? Okay, how many are reviewers? How many are contractors? And what did I miss? Inspectors? Oh, I'm an inspector. We don't count. So how many are inspectors? Yeah, I did miss one. I'm like, that was 3. There's one more. So, okay, so we have a few inspectors. So we have a little bit of a mix, but a lot of them are contractors. And probably the question that you're asking yourself is, what can I do for my construction entrances that's going to work? To which I kind of laugh a little bit and say, oh, that's a wonderful question without an easy answer. So the problem obviously is the mud tracking, the tracking of the sediment off the site by our vehicles. And it can be the vehicles that are hauling stuff in, hauling stuff out, our concrete trucks. It can be our employees' vehicles if they have to park on the site. It can be that gosh darn inspector that comes on and does their inspections after a rainstorm or whatever. But basically the problem is there is going to be track out, and we have to just accept it, and we have to deal with it and try and come up with the best possible solution for that specific site. Now, what I am going to present to you is a number of different options, a number of different ideas, things that may or may not work. There is no one perfect answer because all of them require either funds, they require maintenance, they require room to set up. Maybe the BMP is not robust enough for long-term use. So there's always limitations to every single one that is out there. So I'm going to try and give you a number of different options to look at. So obviously the solution is you clean the tires. Simple enough solution, right? Get out there with the soap and the water and spray down every single tire of every single vehicle that decides to leave the site. Probably not the most practical, although I will present a BMP that makes use of the washing aspect of it. But traditionally, what I see the most of is some sort of pad of some kind. And for a long, long time, we relied predominantly on the gravel pad at the entrance to control the runoff, the track out leaving the site itself. And so let's go ahead and talk about that. Unfortunately, the problem with the rock pad is, well, one, you have to have the availability of that rock for your site. So it may be readily available, it may not. It may be a very high cost item to actually bring that rock to a specific site, maybe not. But it is the more traditional way, and it is still widely specified and used, and it can be effective. It can be effective. But the big problem is it requires the correct setup and then the correct type of maintenance and ongoing maintenance to make sure it works. Like I said, it may or may not be available in your area. A lot of the times what I see happen, and especially on DOT projects or very small projects, is they do not have enough space to get the proper length. The idea behind any type of tracking pad is as the vehicle drives over the pad, whether it's rock or something else, the vibration of the tires going on that material should help knock the sediment off of the tires. It works okay. Like I said, depending on the maintenance and the long-term longevity of the different types of BMP. But you need a sufficient length to be able to get that distance for those tires to go over it enough to get enough of the vibration to cause the sediment to fall off the tires. So many times we just don't have it. So when that started really becoming an issue, we've had a lot of different individuals out there come up with different solutions. So let's finish up with the rock, and I'll present some of the other ones to you. One of the problems we do have with the rock, and this is going to happen over time, is it's going to disappear. And that is caused by a number of different reasons. Some cases it's just because they place the rock on the ground itself, and the pressure of the vehicles pushing down on it just push it into the soil itself. Also, the fact that you're going to have mud collecting within the rock itself gives it the impression of it disappearing because it becomes so clogged and becomes ineffective. This one here, you can kind of see the spots where it seems to be disappearing in places where it is not. This one, they did not put a fabric underneath it. And that is one way that you can help control it. But also the big one is maintenance. I always kind of say with any type of BMP, maintenance is a big aspect to whether or not that BMP is going to function long term. But a way to get rid of that is you put the rock on a filter fabric, which means that's a little bit more cost, a little more time, a little more effort into the BMP itself, and then using the right diameter rock. And the reason I actually bring up the diameter is it's interesting how I've seen going across the nation and actually in a few places across the world, how it seems like the incorrect rock size is used a lot. And we tend to go towards the too small size. So the correct size rock is the 2 to 4 inches. And this is true for a number of reasons. One, we get a little more of that vibration on the tires, but also it doesn't get stuck in the actual treads of the tire itself. That can happen with the smaller size rock. It gets stuck within the mud that's found within the tread, and then you leave the site, and now you have rocks in your tires, and what do those become? Projectiles. So it becomes a safety hazard at that point. So 2 to 4 inches is a rough estimate to actually work, that seems to work pretty well. I've actually seen some places where they were calling out for 6-inch plus rock. I just kind of laughed at that municipality, and it was a municipality that did this because no one ever used those pads. No one drove on them. They went around them. They found other ways to get onto the site. The big trucks won't drive on these, and also the issue with these is the larger rock is that it's been known to get stuck between the dually tires, and now we don't have a small projectile, we have a large projectile that can fly out from between them. So that becomes an even bigger safety hazard than the small stuff. So you have to get that right mix there. So a lot of things go into the rock pad itself, but it is the more traditional BMP that is used. And I'm not saying don't use it. If you can get the length, you can install it correctly, you can do the maintenance on it, it can work satisfactorily. Geosynthetic mats. This one came about a number of years ago, and the first place I actually saw it being utilized was on a DOT project. And I had to stop and actually take a look at this, try and understand what it was. And so it's a geosynthetic material, and basically within it is little pockets. And in those pockets are bamboo boards, basically. And so the idea is, and I think I have a better picture in 1 minute, is the tire goes over and the bamboo causes that vibration to occur, and magically the soil falls off of it. The problem with these is that they are a very short length of material. Doesn't mean you can't use more of them, and I'll show you a couple pictures of those here in an instant, but it seems like a lot of contractors and designers and municipalities look at this and say, well, because I get this length, that's what I am supposed to use. I know home builders love them because they're able to put them to each single lot, but as you can see in that lower photo there, you can see the massive limitations to them. They should be anchored down, but if they're placed on softer soil or soil that's not compact, they tend to move and get mushed into the tire treads as the vehicles go over and over again, and they get trashed pretty bad. This one here is what I was telling you. You can actually use obviously multiple ones in conjunction and actually create a fairly significant pad length, but in most cases I don't see this happening. Because obviously that's an added expense. Purchase one, cheaper. Purchase 6 of them, a lot more expensive. So it can be done, it should be done, but it's not typically done. But there you can see kind of the 2 of them put together, which would work a lot better than just one single width. But it has its limited effectiveness, and this is the one I was talking about. This shows a great view of it, where you can see the little pockets in there with the bamboo in them. Problem is over time that bamboo does shatter and break, and that's where we have the lack of maintenance, because in many cases it's not replaced. They don't go back in and replace those pieces. So it becomes basically useless. And like I said, just over time, these things need to be cleaned up. They need to be maintained. Is it a bad product? Absolutely not. It's simple because it's easy to put down, it's easy to pick back up, and technically it is reusable. But I just always urge caution to make sure that the BMP will work for your site. I don't see this working in a heavy traffic area. All right? If you have infrequent vehicles going on the site, maybe. It might be something that could potentially work in that instance. And then, like I said, the maintenance, the ridges in the fabric, the bamboo is not replaced, and then the fabric does tear over time. This one here is what I think of as a flexible ridge because it does have some bend to it. It's an interesting one where it has an open weave construction there. It's very sturdy and it's really reusable, and it's hard to destroy it overall, but it does have its limitations. Those openings can get filled with the sediment very quickly if we have it in a high use area. The idea again is as the tires are going over it, you can kind of see some of these are a little bit raised over some of them. Once again, it's trying to create that vibration as the vehicle drives over it. The one thing I love about these photographs is we get these from the distributor is how clean the tire is that's driving over it. You know, I really want them to show you the muddy, gross pictures and show you how effective it truly can be. But I look at it and its limitations, and one limitation is it takes a piece of machinery to actually pick it up and move it. But it's kind of a one-time cost. You buy it one time and then you can reuse it and reuse it and reuse it for a number of different construction sites. But it has to be maintained. One person asked, well, how do you remove the material from it? And I said, well, please don't pull out the wash truck and hose it down. That's a big no-no. But I've heard of them actually using vacuum trucks to go in and vacuum the material out of it. It doesn't make it perfectly clean, but it does at least remove a lot of the accumulated material on this. Non-flexible ridges, and I've seen this used here in Hawaii itself. To me, it's an interesting one. I haven't yet seen it used with a lot of mud yet. The place I saw it, it was a staging area, and the area was actually grassed in. So there wasn't a whole lot of mud coming off of it. Still an appropriate location to use it. But I really want to see the gross tires actually go over it and see how effective it is. Once again, though, the limitations come in is how much length you can get on it. A short length, you may not have enough to get enough of the material off the tires itself. Normally, they have the fabric underneath it, and it's secured to the ground so it doesn't move and migrate and everything. And it's an interesting product. It doesn't really have the different elevation of ridges, so that's why I'd love to see this one, the muddier pictures. It's something that I think could be utilized, again, just at the right location for the right site itself. So see a slightly muddy tire sitting on it, it could work. Again, it's probably going to be maintained utilizing the vacuum truck again or something along those lines because it's hard to clean the material out of them. But ideally, I guess you could just pop it back up and pull the fabric and remove the fabric with all the sediment in it and then just put new fabric down. That's also another option. Another one, and this one's an interesting one. I'm not sure how long they've been around, but I've seen it at the conferences and I've seen it actually used in my areas back home. But it's a very robust vehicle tracking control because these are little pyramids and they sit up pretty high. And the idea behind them is that still it's kind of the vibration, but also the tires seem to kind of not conform to them, but they kind of get wiped off to a certain extent as they go over the actual pad itself. There you go, the top picture there kind of shows you how some of those bigger machinery, the treads can go in between them. Like I said, I haven't yet seen this one in action either. At the places I've seen them, it's been during a drier season, so we haven't actually had the muddy tires going over it yet. But again, it's a reusable structure, and I think it's something that could be of use on the right construction site. The biggest problem that I know that you here in Hawaii have is the import of materials. And that part I can't answer you on. You'd have to actually talk to the vendors out there. I thought there was one of them, I think he was going to actually see if he could start bringing in this one specifically for use in the Hawaii. I don't know if he has succeeded in it, but it'd be neat to do. But it's an item that can be reused, and they come in the smaller sections so it can fit the actual site itself. And again, probably a vacuum truck or of some kind to actually remove the material itself. The nice thing about the geosynthetics mats is you don't have to dispose of them. That's the one issue I do see with the rock, is when the site is done, you pretty much have to pick it up and haul it probably to a garbage refuse place versus trying to typically reuse it. These are reused over and over again. So I would definitely look at the cost versus benefit analysis of some of the traditional methods versus some of the new ones. Grates and ridges. Grates are an interesting one because there's a lot of different types of them out there. They can be ones that are just constructed on the site itself, or ones that are actually manufactured and brought to the site. Always the question to be asking is, once again, that significant length for the tires to go over. In this case, so many times they end up using a rock pad prior to the actual ridges itself, kind of gives it an initial cleaning, and then they go over the ridges themselves. This one kind of indicates, and this is what I would try for as a minimum on any type of pad, doesn't matter the material, is a minimum of one tire rotation. This one made use of something that was already in place. It was an agricultural field, and so they actually had a guard in place for cattle. And so the contractor said, can I just reuse them? And the regulatory people said, why not? Let's give it a try, but we need to make it a little bit better. So they implemented rock prior and after it. To me, the rock is a little too small, but the idea is there, and they were actually able to make good use of it. This one here is one that, like I said, it's a manufactured one, and it can be brought to the site. To me, the length is very lacking, because even though you can get pretty much one tire rotation, that's the kind of thing that you do end up with, is when you have those really bad situations, it does a little bit, and then but not enough. And this is with rock here and rock there. So like I said, the limitations, and typically it's the length that is lacking. This is one that's a truly mobile one, and actually has the containment area underneath. So you drive up, you drive over and off, and the idea is the sediment is actually captured in that unit itself. Possibly for real small sites or whatever. This one is a combination of them, and it kind of is leading me into the next topic. It's a combination of a water bath or a water trough. It's a passive, but here's the grates here, so it doesn't matter. They come off the site, they go up over grates into the water bath, and they still come down the grates itself. So like I said, this kind of leads me into this next topic. This is probably your most effective way of removing sediment off of tires. However, interestingly enough, I seldom see these used in the United States. Where I do see them used is in Asia. This one was from Singapore. I have photographs of passive and active ones from Malaysia as well. So it's kind of an interesting thought there that they use them predominantly over there, but over here we seldom ever see them. And yes, they are an expense. Because you obviously have to have the setup, you have to have the source of water, you have to have the pump, you have to have the collection chamber to collect the runoff, you have to have the storage chamber. How do you treat the runoff or the water that is actually sprayed on the tires? Is it recycled, or is it sent through a set of BMPs? And then obviously, are we still tracking? Interestingly enough, though, these can be very effective, but there's also a labor cost involved, because somebody has to be manning it whenever you have the vehicles go through it. The one down on the bottom is one that is made in the United States. It'd be interesting to see it actually function on a site itself. The idea is there, it's an automated one, so it's not something that has to be done with actual labor, but it could be potentially successful. This one is a passive one. I look at these as active, because people have to be there. It has to be actively going, water being sprayed. This one to me is what I think of as a passive. It's just a water bath, a lined channel where they have water that has to be cleaned out and maintained ever so often, the sediment removed from it, but the vehicle goes in and it goes forward and backwards a number of times, depending on how bad the tires actually are, before it leaves the site. And as you can see, they actually have a rock pad, and even with the forward and back, they still have some tracking of material on them. So it can be effective depending on how it's used and how much this is actually maintained. And so I always pose the question whenever I see these is, how do you remove the sediment from the water itself? Do you just pump everything out, put fresh water in? Do you just keep adding fresh water until you're driving on just a thick layer of mud in the bottom? all questions to be asking when considering them. This one here is, like I said, this is an active, and this is an active one. It'd be neat to see these because these are supposed to be portable. Well, this one is, and be able to be easily moved from site to site. These have to be constructed. This one I think has to be really set up as well. Okay, and then I look at it, the end result out of all of this is you clean stuff up, you clean the material up, what do you do with it afterwards? Whether or not it's from a tracking pad, whether or not it's vacuumed up out of a vacuum truck, always the disposal, but that's what we're trying to deal with, is keeping that from getting out on the street. So, different methods: rock, geosynthetic, obviously flexible, non-flexible, grates, ridges, wheel washing. Like I said, I call it passive or active. And that's kind of it. I always end